First tonight, Berlin is coming under increasing pressure to give the go-ahead for the delivery of German-made tanks to Ukraine. Poland says it wants approval to send the Leopard 2 tanks in its inventory to Kyiv. It's being discussed at a meeting of EU foreign ministers in Brussels. Poland needs the consent of Germany to send the tanks to a non-NATO country, but Poland's Prime Minister said Warsaw will make its own decision if Berlin does not permit the move. Ukraine has called on the West to provide the tanks, which they say will help them in their war with Russia.
We will apply for such consent from Germany for transfer of Leopard tanks to Ukraine, but this is a secondary topic. Even if we do not get this consent in the end, as part of a small coalition, even if the Germans would not be in this coalition, we will still hand over our tanks together with others to Ukraine. The condition for us at the moment is to build at least such a small coalition of states, and on this issue, together with President Andrzej Duda, Deputy Prime Minister Mariusz Błaszczak, we are contacting our partners in Western Europe.
Let me be clear that Germany is an engine of Europe, the biggest partner in the European Union, and it creates also a particular responsibility. And I hope that there will be not a certain ambivalency, a purgatorium on that decision which is on there, but we will have to act immediately. The Russians will continue to verbally terrorize and frighten, making an attempt to frighten us. Whatever by conventional military aid means we are doing, it will continue, but we need to do what is our obligation in the context of genocidal war.
It's imperative to send all the weaponry that Ukraine needs in order to push the front forward, to reclaim the territories back. Russia has to understand, and the sooner the better, that this war will end badly to Russia. There's no way out of it. There's no negotiating your way out of it. There's no tearing Europe apart. There's only losing. That what they start is a losing war, and they will lose it.
Well, on Sunday, Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock told French television that the country won't stand in the way if Poland decides to send its Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. Russia has responded by saying that sending Western weapons to Ukraine will trigger a global catastrophe.
We have rules for Czechs. The question has been asked to others. For the moment the question has not been asked, but if we were asked we would not stand in the way.
Well, Arise Chief Correspondent John Cookson has been monitoring developments, and he joins me now from London. Good to see you, John. And it seems that Poland has been encouraged by these comments made by the German foreign minister yesterday, suggesting that Berlin would not stand in the way of Poland if it wanted to send those Leopard tanks to Ukraine.
To see you, yes, but there's a bit of doublespeak going on here, because the news tonight from Germany is that Poland hasn't even made an official request yet to Berlin to send tanks. So let's put that out there. I mean, this is typical EU umming and ahhing, shall we, shan't we? And these tanks and the decision on tanks is just another example of it. I think at day's end, the Poles will end up sending perhaps a token gesture of tanks, but we can talk about that in a moment. Look, the Leopard tank is desperately needed by Ukraine. Zelensky's been asking for them since last March, indeed, the first week of the invasion. So it's taken that long for this row to bubble up to what we've got at the moment. But right now, Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, is standing firm, and no permission has been given for Poland to export these tanks. For the German-made tanks, the Leopard tank is the workhorse of the German army. Built the original ones built in 1979. They have excellent range. They have incredible night vision. They're very maneuverable, and it's just what the Ukrainians need. But since the Second World War, Germany has been forbidden to export offensive weapons, and certainly the tank is an offensive weapon without a special license, and that's what we're talking about at the moment. So it seems that Poland hasn't yet put in an official request. They have 200 of these Leopard tanks in various states of condition, but about 200 that are serviceable. And they could, for example, spare 100 to Ukraine, which of course is just across the border, and it's so easy to transport by train these tanks to Ukraine. But this permission has still not been given by Germany, Charles.
And I wonder what the issue is with Germany, John, because there seems to be rather confusing messages coming from Berlin. I mean, the foreign minister, as we said, sounding quite encouraging, but the Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, who is the person that ultimately makes the decision, seems quite reluctant. Is that because Germany has a coalition government and the foreign minister and Chancellor represent different parties?
That's a good point that you make. Coalition governments are always weak, and here we see another example of that. But as you say, Olaf Scholz is the man, and the buck stops with him. And he's not giving permission at the moment. He's spent his life as a pacifist, generally speaking, and there's a long history here, of course, of when East and West Germany existed. East Germany was part of the Soviet Union. There's a lot of sympathy, especially amongst the older population, towards Russia generally. And remember, I produced a poll last week for you, Charles, that said that 41% of Germans think that Germany is already doing enough. 25% of Germans believe that their country could do more for Ukraine in terms of military hardware. But a sizable 26% of the country, 26% of Germans think that's Germany's gone too far and it shouldn't go any further than that. So all of these factors are in play. Also, Germany very worried that this might lead to a big escalation of the war, and Russia, of course, being a nuclear power. And Germany, the last thing Germany wants is to become a theatre of war, Charles.
So, John, given all the things you just said, I mean, if the German Chancellor was to object, I understand Poland, and I think you hinted on that, is now talking about putting together a coalition of NATO countries which could all give Leopard tanks to Ukraine without Germany's permission. What are the ramifications of that, and how much would it complicate matters?
Well, let's say that they give 200. Zelensky's asking for 300. Military experts say that a game changer could be 100 tanks. But let's settle on 200 tanks, Leopard tanks handed over to the Ukrainians. They'd be shipped down primarily to the east, to the Kharkiv area, and down most of them, in fact, down south, to smash through Russian defenses in the Donbass region, with the idea of pushing Ukrainian forces all the way down to Crimea, which was seized illegally by Russia in 2014. And if the Ukrainians can get into Crimea, then they will cut off tens of thousands of Russian troops in the Donbass region. So that's the idea behind all of this. At the moment, the war is in stalemate. There's a lot of fighting going on. 100,000 people have died on either side. There's no end in sight. But if the Ukrainians can get their hands on these tanks, there is a possibility for them to make a big change and to defeat Russian Tu-72, 75 tanks on the battlefield. And of course, these tanks, being the Ukrainians want, are offensive weapons, and would take the war into a completely different sphere of operation.
Well, briefly, John, we've got less than a minute or so. I mean, I've heard it said that if they sent those tanks to Ukraine without Germany's permission, there'd be a problem maintaining them because all the parts are in Germany.
There is that, and not only that, Charles. Tanks need support. They need backup. They need to be repaired, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of more men needed to maintain these tanks. And there's another point here that I've heard said, Charles. You'll recall that the Americans pulled out of Afghanistan, leaving the Taliban with billions of dollars worth of fantastic American military equipment. The fear is in Germany that if Russia wins the war, and we can talk about what winning means at some other time, if the Russians win the war and they take over a sizable part of Ukraine, it will be an absolute windfall for the Russians to get all these tanks. So this is another reason why Germany is opposed to things at the moment.
John, always appreciate your analysis. Thank you very much indeed. John Cookson is Arise chief correspondent, and he's been monitoring developments around Ukraine for us from London.